going on, everybody? Frank Pinelli here, coming at you from my garage. I want to discuss with you what we haven't adjusted yet, right? We've already got our pressure to the regulator. We've got full flow going into the gun here with your pressure valve down here. Full fluid at your fluid tip adjusted, but we've got a really kind of straight line coming out because we haven't adjusted our fan pattern yet. So I'm going to spray a little bit of aerosol injected cleaner into here. So now we're going to connect the gun and see what happens. So up against this hood, which we're going to be doing our test against, watch as this is going to shoot straight out and give you a real bullet shot like that. See that? That is not the way that you want your fluid to come out of your gun. What you're looking for is a nice elliptical shape. It's going to look kind of like a football. So we're going to pull this back. So right now also notice as we pull the gun, there's two steps to it almost. This is just air. We're moving just air right now. So you can start just air, and then there's the second part where you actually pull the trigger and it lets the fluid out. And again, when you pull that trigger all the way back, I mean, you want that full rearward pull on that trigger. So let's adjust this out now, and let's see, let's kind of feel for how far back it goes. So right there, it's bottomed out. I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3 turns, maybe 4 forward, and now let's see what happens. Okay, saw how we got 2 heavy spots up top and nothing in the middle? That was a great demonstration actually of being a little bit too much on the reverse side. The first one, as we saw, you get a straight bullet in the middle, which is too much fluid in the front, and this here you get it really heavy on the top and the bottom and no fluid in the middle, and that's bad. So now we know we still need to kind of find someplace happily in the middle. So 1, 2, 3 more turns. Now let's see what happens. Okay, still again a little heavy on the top and the bottom. Let's rotate 1, 2. Okay, now we've kind of got that football shape, but that's still a little bit too fat. I'm going to pull it back 1. That was looking closer to it. I'm going to go about a half turn right. Now we're kind of there. That's pretty good. Yeah, right about there. That's it. See that? It's a really great elliptical shape. So how do we remember this? Because this doesn't really lock in. So what I'm actually going to do now is get my Sharpie. Again, this is something you kind of have to play with each time you do it with your gun, and hopefully your hand doesn't hit this. You can lock this in with some tape if you want, but also what I'm going to do is mark my number 1, and then I'm going to mark this knob up here. So now I know this is where I want it to be. And again, your hand really doesn't come up here too often, but still, now we've kind of found that really great shape. So now let's talk about technique real quick. When we're painting, we start off the panel. You don't start on the panel. If you start here and stop at the end, every time you're building up extra bits of material, and it's going to start to run on you because this is going to get really heavy and really thick. And you're adding a second pass almost each time. So we start off the panel, here, air, fluid right as we're coming to the edge, right? And we're maintaining that perpendicular, about 6 to 8 inches. You're following the curve of the panel. Let's say we just stay straight like this. Watch how the distance is going to increase as I'm staying straight. No, you're staying perpendicular and following the curvature of the panel. There's a great video out there by John Kosmosky. It's called How to Paint a Car by House of Color. It's a really great video, and honestly he talks a lot about just being the robot. You have to just be robotic and mechanical in your movement, keeping this gun perpendicular, managing your speed, your pace. It's really an art. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of strain on your arm and your body too. It's really a lot of work doing this. But as we come to the edge, we start off, right as we get to the edge, we're going to pull our fluid, and we're on. And that's great atomization that I could see right there already. So obviously I stopped here halfway through, but we'd go covering the edge, off, back on, off, on, off. And you're doing a 50% overlap too when you're painting. Now in this case tonight, just for this test video, we're not going to really go for the whole deal as far as masking everything off, because I'm going to do a real quick shot on here. But what I would normally do is take drop cloths like these and pick a top spot on the garage and literally go all the way around. If you guys have ever seen the show Dexter, pretty much make this an entire murder room of stuff. So this way you're not getting dust and spray off all over your tools and your nice equipment and anything else that's in here. So For tonight though, it's going to be a real quick shot. I'm not going to worry too much about it. We're not going to get too much material floating in the air. The other things that you're really going to want to do again is safety. Your gloves, your respirator, having ventilation, getting the air out of here. This fender here for the Roadrunner is not ready yet to actually get primed because I still have to get all this fixed here for this bodywork. But this is what you ideally want, is bare metal, getting it flat and straight, much as you can, hammering things out, filling holes for rust, new metal, then doing body filler, getting that thing laser straight, blocking it out. That's stuff for another video, but now you've reached that point and we're pretending that this is here. In this case, for what we're actually doing right now, I'm going to clean this off though, and I'm going to hit this with the Scotch pad. You still do want clean adhesion, even though this is just a quick little test video just to show you guys something. What I'm going to do is put a minor scuff into the panel. Why am I scuffing the panel though? Why are we doing this? Let's talk about that really quick. For a minute, let's talk really quick about
science.
What actually happens when we're painting a car, and why do we even sand it down? What happens, right? So, right before we're going to lay down our primer, usually you want to finish off with about a 320, maybe a 400 grit sandpaper. Not really going to be doing wet sanding for that process. This will be dry sanded with probably a dual action sander or something like that. You can go by hand too. But we need to get some grit. We need to get some bite in this panel, right? But why? What's happening? There's an actual mechanical adhesion that's going on, a chemical process where you've got essentially thinking about this panel, think about it as the rough part of Velcro. You put that 300, well thanks. Let's think about that 320 grit, all these little lines in here, right? Those little cuts are actual microscopic cuts into the metal. And let's imagine the metal on our panel is right here, the rough side of Velcro. Now, when you come to paint it, that paint coming out is atomizing in the air. It's spraying out in microscopic little particles, and it's going to float and land right on your panel. Really nice, right? Kind of almost like the fuzzy side of Velcro. You've got your fuzzy atomized little particles of paint floating through the air really quick, right towards the rough cut part of your metal, and boom, it's going to stick. And it's a pretty good bond, and that's going to stick. Versus, on the contrary, if you were to paint your car and you hadn't actually sanded it down and prepped the body and actually built that bite for the paint to be able to stick to it, it would be more like this. Imagine the backside of this box, some paper, really smooth, right? You've got no grit, no cut in here, there's no bite. Still, here's our paint. Ain't really sticking. Kind of an extreme example, but basically that's what you got to do. If you were to take a clean piece of metal and never prep it and never sand it down, you're not going to get that paint to bite and stick, and it's not going to last you for years to come. So this is why you actually have to get some bite in the paint job. So again, over here what I'm doing, just for our test purposes tonight, is going over with the Scotch pad. I'm putting little microscopic bite marks here in the paint, and you can actually start to see it kind of dulling out. And notice also I'm going in a crosshatch method, meaning down like this, up like that. Even though, again, this is just for testing purposes, that's sort of the way I've trained myself, the way that you want to actually sand stuff. If you go straight across like this, if you've got a bump here in the middle, you're just going to be following the contours of the bump. By doing the crosshatch, you actually cut into it from the two different angles there and actually break down high spots. So hitting this here, getting this thing prepped, so I can spray a little primer on here and show you guys how that gun works. The reason why I'm doing this actually is before I try out any new gun on my cars, I actually like to test them out on something. So it's actually perfect here. This old hood, even though it's dented and beat up, it'll serve perfectly to actually test this thing out and lay down some paint, in this case some primer, and see how it performs. Alright, so now you're ready to paint, but how are we actually doing it? What's the technique? You've got to imagine yourself like you are a robot, and the paint gun is literally an extension of your body now. I'm telling you, painting a whole car is an exhausting process, especially when you're doing, one whole coat. Even if you've taken off the hood, the fenders, the trunk, and you're just doing the rest of the body with the doors, the roof, the quarter panels. By the time you pretty much get finished painting one whole pass in that car and it flashes off, you're almost ready to get into doing another coat. And I sweat my butt off by the time I'm done painting a car. Your arm is out here, right? We're trying to be that robot, so this really takes a lot of wear and tear on your shoulders, your back. It's an exhausting process, let me tell you, but it's really rewarding and a lot of fun. You've got your 6-inch distance from the panel right here, and we're remaining perpendicular. You don't want to be actually turning and twisting, because then you're going to be getting heavy deep spots and heavy spots on one or the other side as we're going through painting. So remaining perpendicular, meaning that you're following the curve of the panel. You're not moving like this with your arm. We're actually flowing our body, and you have to carefully actually map out your steps. You want to actually practice before you even start painting. I'll get over here like this, and I will map out my steps. You're making sure there's nothing on the floor, nothing in the way. You're going to trip over. You're also controlling your gun line. You know, you might have it behind your back. There's going to be ways that you have to make sure that thing doesn't get in the way. So this way you can basically be a robot right here, and we're moving and we're slowly flowing and maintaining that good speed. And that's something that you guys kind of have to learn. It's hard to really teach that, but you know, you can't go too fast or too slow, and you'll start to see if it gets, you know, too heavy and wet, you're going too slow. If it's getting really spotty and light, if anything, you want that to be what happens, and then you can kind of hit it with a second coat, and that's okay. You can kind of dust it on by going too fast, but going too slow, it's going to go on thick and heavy, it's going to run. You're basically just going to have to wait until it's done and dry and have to sand it down and start again. So that's why even before doing painting on your car, something like I'm doing right here, right now with an old piece of an old hood, testing it out and actually practicing before we actually do the real thing and really make a mess out of stuff. So we're perpendicular, we've got our distance, we're being the robot, you're holding that arm rigid and it's out in front of you, and we're doing a nice flow and contour against the body of the car. We're moving like this, and we're actually coming out beyond the end of the panel and continuing. We're not flapping our wrists around and doing a whole bunch of crazy whirly stuff. We're laying that paint down nice and flat and being predictable so that we can, in our minds, each time as we pass through here, making our 50% overlap, remember how we did it. If you're just coming here to the end and kind of flicking it off and getting all fancy like some people do, I don't like to do that. You want to keep that nice perpendicular pattern as we're going and spraying off the panel, not stopping at the end. If you stop at the end, you're going to build up really thick, deep spots, and it's going to run, and that's going to really ruin your paint job. Because imagine, every time you stop, you're making a minuscule, tiny little stop, but it's actually holding that paint there a little bit longer versus coming off the end and then stopping and then continuing again. Lock in, folks. There we go. All right, so now got my hose, and I'm going to get behind it. And I want this hose behind me, and I'm controlling this hose, so this way it's not falling and landing in my paint job. And let's say I'm going to start here, right? We're at the end, perpendicular, because there's a good curve here at the end of this panel. Air, and right as I'm reaching the end of this hood, I'm going to pull back the trigger all the way and let the fluid start coming out. And boom. Obviously I didn't fill the gun up properly enough, but let me show you what I just did right there. Got a pretty nice spray out just going like that. And so we'd start here, just air, boom. Material down, all the way to the end, off. Back on, material down, 50% overlap. And now we've kind of got our technique down, right? Ooh, there was a good one. Just got to add some more lacquer thinner inside this thing. But you can see I got a nice little dusting going across the surface of here of this hood. And then you're doing that 50% overlap. Which means, right, you can see what we've got laid down here. 50% is about this. So now the next one is going to cover that much. Again, we want to be faster versus slower. The way that laid down, though, I can already see it's coming down really nice. So now you're starting to get it, right? We're the robot. This gun is a part of your body. We're moving, we're staying perpendicular.